John Blichmann joins me this week to discuss homebrewing trends and simplifying your beer. This is BeerSmith Podcast number 318. This is BeerSmith Podcast number 318, and it's late January 2025. John Blichmann joins me this week to discuss homebrewing trends and simplifying your beer. Thank you to this week's sponsors, Craft Beer and Brewing Magazine. They've recently added a new collection of more than 500 beer recipes from pro brewers to their site, and most let you download the BeerSmith recipe file. The new Craft Beer and Brewing recipe site is at beerandbrewing.com/beer-recipes. Again, that's beerandbrewing.com/beer-recipes. And BeerSmith Web, the online version of BeerSmith brewing software. BeerSmith for the web lets you design great beer recipes from any browser, including your tablet or your phone. Edit recipes on the go with access to the same full suite of recipe building tools as our desktop version. Try BeerSmith Web today by creating a free account at beersmithrecipes.com. And finally, a reminder to click that like and subscribe button on YouTube, iTunes, Spotify, or whatever platform you're on. Clicking those buttons is a great way to support the show. And now let's jump into this week's episode. Today on the show, I welcome back John Blichmann. John is the founder and retired president of Blichmann Engineering, a provider of premium home and professional brewing equipment. John has helped hundreds of brewers start craft breweries. John, it's a pleasure to have you on the show. How are you doing today?
Good. Great to be here. It's like I'm on an angle here.
Are you angled? Yeah, you just angled a little bit in the kitchen there. It's a pleasure to have you. It's been about a year since I had you on last, and I think in that time you actually retired from Blichmann Engineering, which of course is a company that you founded.
Yeah, it's been 2024 was started off. I sold to Drew Barnes. He was my VP for many years, and we did the signing of the papers on February 1 or January 31st, one of those. And he's taken it from there and didn't skip a beat. And I've been spending time, well, pretty much doing all those things I told my wife I didn't have time to do because I was too busy with work. I don't have that excuse, so.
Are you enjoying retirement?
Yeah. Yeah, it's funny. My dad, when he retired years ago, he said, "Geez, I don't know how I had time to work." And I was like, "It's the dumbest thing. What's he talking about?" Well, now I know what he's talking about.
Yeah.
I think busy people just fill their time with lots of activities. So I've been, doing home remodel projects and getting back into some woodworking stuff that I hadn't done in a long time, and actually brewing more, believe it or not.
I know. I think you mentioned you've been brewing, I think, smaller batches, right?
I've been brewing. I used to brew 10-gallon batches just because I couldn't brew that often, so I just would like to have that. And then sometimes I'd bring a keg to work, just leave it there. But now it's nice brewing as just a hobby instead of, well, I've got to brew to test this or check out this piece of equipment or that kind of thing. It's just brewing just as a hobby and fun again, which is it's good. I always enjoyed brewing, even when I was testing equipment and stuff. But now it's just a lot more low key and all that stuff. So, and then I've been doing a little more fishing. Some of my shooting sports, I've been doing more traveling with that and visiting kids. I have a daughter in San Antonio now, one up in Chicago, and my third daughter's here in Lafayette. So
nice. Well, today you wanted to talk about how to combat the decline in homebrewing, and I think I sent you a thing about Google Trends. It's been in decline, slow decline for like 10 years now. We had a little blip pickup during COVID, but it's probably, we really ought to talk about the changes going on. It's very interesting how things have declined.
Yeah, it's kind of, some of it kind of makes sense. Some is still a little puzzling. During COVID, it was just, our business anyway, and most of the retailers that I've talked to just went crazy. I'm not sure if that's because there were more people coming into the hobby, or the people that were in the hobby were just brewing a lot more because they were, at home, and it was difficult, in the early days anyway, to get out and um, go to stores and that kind of stuff. But um, probably more people with just time on their hands at home brewing. Uh, but then after, in that 23, 24 time frame, it just started slowing down, and craft as well. So we were seeing both the same on both the homebrew side and also on the craft side.
Yeah, I mean, craft brewing is interesting because it has finally swung. I guess it was growing double digits for many many years, and I think we hit something like 9,600 breweries at the peak.
Yeah,
But now in the last year, I guess most people are telling me we're in like maybe a 5% decline or something like that in the last year.
that that sounds probably like in the overall craft. And I think it goes, segment by segment too. I think a lot of the regional breweries that are struggling. I think a lot of that was inevitable. It just tap saturation. There's only so many taps at the bars you can sell to, and that, I think, kind of limited some of the growth, and perhaps there was just too many regional breweries out there. The smaller breweries, they're the taproom breweries, if you want to call them that. They're not fighting for taps, but I think there were a lot that either uh, were built not in a good location, or their beer just was not up to par, or they just weren't running it as a business. They just weren't good business people. They may have had some good beers, but just weren't running the business aspect of it and remaining profitable. So I think we've seen a big drop off on those. But then, in my town, we have, it's not a huge community. It's, I don't know, with Lafayette and West Lafayette together is probably 120,000. We've got 5 breweries at one point, and one shut down just towards the end of COVID, and another one shut down just in the past year. But the others are doing great. They're in a good location. They've got more than just beer; they've got food with it as well, and they're doing great. They've got super beers, and so it's, a lot of that. I think there's a number of reasons for the smaller breweries.
Well, while homebrewing's been in decline, I think we are starting to see some early signs of a resurgence, but it's not coming back exactly like it was. I mean, we're starting to see, for example, I'm starting to see some of the homebrew clubs grow again, and they were hit really hard during COVID. But it's not only that; people are changing the way they brew. And what are some of the big changes you're seeing in homebrewing?
Well, some of that I've actually kind of noticed it in myself as well as brewing smaller batch sizes. I don't uh, drink as much as I used to when I had kids. I'll drive you to drink, uh, but and I also like to have a little bit more variety on hand. So I used to, like I was saying earlier, I used to brew in 10-gallon batch size. Now I brew in 5, and really starting to think about just brewing in 2.5 or 3-gallon batch sizes, just for variety. And I just enjoy, taking a, half a day to brew, and just kind of just calm and relaxing day. So, um, and one of the other things I've noticed myself doing is just getting back to the very basics, and not only on equipment and process, but getting back to those classic beer styles. Um, that's been um, kind of a fun thing to get back. It's kind of like nostalgia. Those are the beers that I think you and I both started brewing. Porters and ambers and pale ales. Just classic German pills, those kind of beers.
Yeah, I think the English beers are certainly attractive styles, at least to me. In fact, they've been some of my favorites for many years. Um, there's some other changes though too. I think people are starting to use more all-in-one equipment, right?
Yeah, that really leads to the process change. It's interesting how it went from stovetop real basic stuff, because it really wasn't, this would be like in the 90s, because there really wasn't very much equipment being manufactured specifically for this hobby. So, it was just like, repurposed commercial pots and pumps even, were not that commonly used in the hobby at that time. And then, it just gradually, we got into the business. I know More Beer was making some equipment, a number of other manufacturers, but as the industry grew, you would see more manufacturing companies show up in the marketplace. And essentially you had miniature versions of commercial brew houses and fermenters, so, I mean, you would have, now they're pressure capable. Some are even starting to have cooling jackets on them versus just the immersion chillers. And it's been interesting to see. But then, with that comes a little bit of an intimidation factor for new brewers, with 3-vessel brewing systems and the high end conical fermenters, not only from a price standpoint, because they are quite a bit more expensive, but just, there's so many valves and fittings and, just processes, to control that. It can be intimidating for some of the newer brewers. Engineers like me, that's part of the fun, is the gadgets and gizmos. That's kind of how I ended up in the hobby so deep, I think. But there's a lot of those folks that are just more into the art side of brewing, which is the recipe development and just the, that creative expression of the beer. And so we started seeing, particularly with some of the new entrants, it used to be you would start with extract on the stovetop and do a concentrated wort boil, and then pour that into some water that was in a carboy to dilute it. And that's kind of how you got started out. And a lot of people just started with plastic buckets, and hardly anybody started doing all grain. And then we came out with the BrewEasy. There was the Spidal, and then came along the systems like the Grainfather.
Yeah, BrewABag type systems, which weren't
Right.
popular, up till, I don't know, 10 years ago or so, I think.
Right. Yeah. BrewABag, if I recall, it pretty much started in Australia and then expanded out to the rest of the brewing community as a real viable way to brew beer. And, and that really was one of the very first simplifications, are those, what they call the all-in-one systems and the BrewABag. They pretty much use the same process, but just slightly different equipment.
Yep.
And, then we started the Anvil brand, and that, and the intent with that brand was simplified products that were still high quality and had a good support system behind them. So that was, one of the brands that we developed, just to kind of have something for that, entry to mid-level brewer. And, they sold well. And, we actually found a lot of the high-end brewers actually buying some of those products just to simplify their brew day. And I've actually, when I developed the BrewEasy, I thought, okay, well, this is fine for apartment brewers and for somebody wanting a more simple process and all that. But I'll go back to my 3-vessel system when I'm done doing the development work for the BrewEasy, and I loved it so much I never went back. So yeah. I brew on the BrewEasy, and I've got a 5-gallon one and a 10-gallon batch size one. So.
I have a 10-gallon one here. It's a great system, but it is still kind of large. Even, I mean, the 10-gallon system is still takes some time to clean it, and it's still an all-day thing to do it. But we are seeing people also move back to extract and stovetop brewing, and just for simplicity. And there's even, I think, More Beer and a couple other companies will come out with no boil, actual no boils kits now.
Yeah, I've actually seen. I think they're Keg King out of Australia. Will down there, good guy. he's selling basically wort kits. So you don't even have to add water to it. So they're he's got a small brew house, and they basically sell wort kits. And
Yeah, he sells. From what I understand, he sells prepackaged wort. So they take the wort out of the brew system and they put it in a cube, and I think they just sell the cube out to people. And that actually, excuse me, that was the inspiration actually behind More Beer when they went to make their new no boil kits. I had Chris Graham on talking about it for some time, and they didn't want to try and ship the cubes of wort around the country, so they actually came out with more of a dry extract type system based on that, but they did a lot of work to make it still taste right and everything without having to boil it. So I thought that was pretty interesting.
Yeah, I can see where sanitation along the way there would be vital. But yeah, I mean, some of them, and again, there's some like in Australia, they really started homebrewing because it was just very expensive to buy beer in there due to taxes. And in Canada, there's a lot of home winemakers up in Canada because the taxes on wine are quite high. So it's kind of interesting, how Canada and Australia, just a couple examples, they started getting into the home brewing, not so much for just a fun hobby. I'm sure there's very many that do, but I think what kind of started driving those was just the high cost of beer and wine, and so it was much more attractive to make it at home and do so for a lot lower cost. And whereas in the States it was fairly relatively inexpensive, so the driving factor wasn't cost. But now, I mean, we've all seen that craft beer is what, $10-15 a six pack now, it seems.
A lot of them are I think even the bottom of them are in the $10 range, and like you said, a lot of the premium ones run quite a bit more than that, and now they're selling 4-packs and singles for even more money, especially some of the specialty beers. So I mean, is homebrewing starting to make economic sense again then?
I really think it is. I mean, if you're doing, like a big New England IPA with a pound of freaking hops in it, that's going to be expensive. You also have a lot of wort loss, but if you're brewing some of the more classic styles, I think you can. I just brewed just an American pale ale, and geez, I think I've got I used dry yeast. I think I've got maybe $40, around that range into the batch, and you get 50 bottles out of that. So that's roughly $5-6 a six pack. So it's less than half or even a third of what you can buy it for. And of course, with any hobby, you never count the equipment cost that you buy. You never factor that into the cost.
Or your time. That's all free too, right?
Or your time. Yeah, you never factor that in. I've got many hobbies. Geez, I can make this. I can remodel that bathroom.
Yeah.
With about $8,000 worth of new tools.
Yeah. Yeah, I did a kitchen last year. A similar thing. I ended up buying a ton of tools. Anyways, things are changing quite a bit. I think we're starting to see, make economic sense again to brew at home. We're seeing people brew smaller batches. I did want to talk about the homebrew stores as well. We've seen a huge number of homebrew stores close. I think 2 in my local area have closed in the last couple months, and the ones that are remaining are really struggling. What's going on in the homebrew market itself in terms of the people that sell the equipment, sell the ingredients, and so on?
I think some of the slowdown in the homebrew end is people are not just not drinking as much, or there's just a lot of other beverages out there that they're they're gravitating for, liquors and seltzers, hard seltzers, hard cider, things like that. Of course you can make the seltzers and ciders and all that stuff at home, but I just think people are just consuming less, and that means that they're going to brew less. And I don't know if I don't have data to support it, but there's probably a number of people that started the hobby when it was really becoming more of a more popular, and that just brewed a few times and then just kind of fizzled out of it, and didn't carry on with it. And there's probably a number of potential reasons for that, but the people that have been in it for a long time, I think, are still going to keep brewing, but probably just less than what they had. And that's every time you brew, that's a sale of grain and hops and yeast and all that for a homebrew store, including sanitizers and airlocks and stoppers, and on an occasional piece of equipment that you'll purchase. So I think that particularly the smaller stores, that don't have the volume or don't have an online presence, to help supplement their sales, they're really struggling, because if that, the revenue drops, but they've still got the same fixed costs, they can, get by maybe with a, two or three less people, but you still have the rent and, the utilities and, all the store infrastructure stuff that you need. So that's where I think we're seeing some of the smaller stores that are going under, and even the bigger stores are starting to struggle. So I've always been a big supporter of local homebrew stores. My local homebrew store is in Indianapolis, about an hour away. But I get down there fairly often, try to stop in, or I just order it online. And so I try to support Brian down there, and it's nice having that homebrew store, particularly if, gee, I'd like to brew tomorrow, or geez, I forgot that, and you don't have somewhere where you can stop in and pick up some of the pieces of equipment or ingredients that you need. So that's one of I say, if you want the convenience of a local homebrew supply store, you really need to support them. And that you may not get the best the lowest possible price, but there's more to this as a hobby than if you were doing it to as a business, that's one thing. But if it's as a hobby, and you want to support those local people that can help you also, if you've got questions or are in a pinch with something, they can help you out, you've really got to support them.
Yeah, I know our local homebrew club's been pushing real hard to keep the remaining stores open, and have people support them. And I know the stores have been stepping up as well. They'll you could call in an order or send them an order, and they'll pre-stage it for you, and so you just walk in and pick it up, and just ways to try and make things more convenient for people. But yeah, I also am a big supporter of the local homebrew clubs, because I think that really is a key resource for us as homebrewers. Like you said, be able to go in and pick up another ounce of hops, or maybe I need a particular yeast that I don't have on hand or whatever. It's a big thing. So.
Yeah, and you bring up a good point with the homebrew clubs. I'm starting to get back to the homebrew club meetings. It was running a business and kids that are moving here, going there, visiting back to Iowa, visiting parents. It seems like every evening is consumed and every weekend is consumed with a bunch of things. But now that life is slowing down a little bit for me, I'm going to start doing more of the homebrew club. In fact, I was just down last week ago, Wednesday, I think it was. Went to a FBI meeting down in India. I'd never been to one down there, and then we've got a club in Lafayette, Tippecanoe Homebrewers Circle. So it was really fun. I was surprised how many people were there. It was an educational one. We talked about porters, and and once again talk about some of those classic beer styles, and it was just a good time. Got to meet some new people that I hadn't met before, and went out to just a local craft brewery afterwards, and had a beer, and then headed back up to Lafayette. So that's a great way to kind of get people, re-energized into brewing is, going to those club meetings, and for the people at the clubs, members of the club, you know, bring some friends in, and, just, bring them to a meeting and let them try the different beers, let them, meet some different people, or show up on a club brew day, or even just bringing them, over, to brew with you, and just let them see, what an enjoyable hobby it is. Those are some great ways to get new entrants in, and then also for the people that have been, you know brewing for a long time, just getting them more reactivated in it.
Yeah, I mean it was slow after COVID. A lot, I speak at a lot of these homebrew clubs, at least the local ones, and things were pretty thin after COVID happened. But it's interesting as I go now, I see more and more people show up. So I think we are seeing a resurgence in the clubs, and I think it's a very good thing.
Yeah, I hope so. I'd like to see just a steady uh, growth back to, pre-COVID kind of levels. I think COVID was just, I mean, that was like with everything, was kind of just it, it was a fluke, and just drove some things to go crazy and some things to go, just drop off the cliff. Um, so it'd be nice to see that, we had a steady growth, and I think getting back to the roots of the clubs, and, you know more of a social uh, setting. Um, Not only just, if you're going to brew, just invite your buddies over to see. I'm sure they, most of them, like my friends, have tried my beers and wines that I make, but not a lot of really been over during a brew day to watch. And, so I'm going to try to do that, just get some people interested in brewing. And I think if everybody tries to push that out there, then, that's going to help the industry. It's going to, keep those homebrew stores going, um, and some of the other industries that support the home brewing, keep them going as well.
And I think your simplification fits into this as well, because if you can simplify the brew day and then bring somebody over and say, hey, you can brew on a stovetop too. You don't have to have, you don't have to have $10,000 worth of equipment to make beer. You could, you can literally make great beer with a bucket and a 3-gallon thing. Yeah. 3-gallon pot.
Yeah. The extracts are going to be more, so it's not going to be so much for cost savings as much. It would definitely be, hey, I just kind of want to learn how this whole brewing process kind of works. And, some people will just stick with that because it's just simple. It's a lot less, time, because you're not having to go through the mashing process, and generally there's a little less equipment to clean up. But that's a great way to get started. And even if you've been an all grain brewer for years, but you just go, I'd like to have some, you know, pale ale on hand. Uh, but I don't have time to spend, a 4 hour, 5 hour brew day, just do one on the stovetop. It's kind of almost refreshing how simple it can be. And then, I've been brewing on the Brew Easy, but I also have an Anvil Foundry, and that's super easy. I mean, you can set the timer. All the water's heated up when you get up in the morning or when you get home from work, and I crush my grains the night before. And that's one of the other things that with these systems, doing all grain brewing is not that complicated anymore. With the knowledge that's out there, with just simple water modifications. Just you can just the mashing process is far less complicated than it was when I started in the early '90s doing the 3 vessel mashing. So those systems make it real approachable, simple. They don't take up a lot of space. BrewABag, like we talked about, is another one. And then brewing those just simple styles that are just so easy to drink. It's kind of, I still brew IPAs, but just some of the ambers and porters and pale ales are just some of those classics I enjoyed when I first started brewing, and they're just easy beers to have on hand and share with friends, and now my daughter's boyfriends, they like to come over, and they know where the beer fridge is, and my daughters know where the wine rack is, so I'm always surprised how many bottles of wine I go through.
I wanted to mention to people, a lot of people don't realize you can make wine, beer, cider, mead using all the same equipment that you have at home. So if you have beer brewing equipment on and you haven't tried a good quality wine kit, for example, or it's very easy to make cider from juice. I had Gordon Strong on talking about that the other day. Or mead is also actually very, very easy to make. You just mix it in a bucket and let it ferment for a while.
Yeah.
It's easy to get into those things, and I actually have tutorials, I think, on my site on the basics for all those things. But you can use your beer brewing equipment, even the simple beer brewing equipment like a bucket, to make all those different beverages. So it's kind of cool.
Oh yeah, yeah.
And I know you've done some of that too.
Yeah, I make wine from whole fruit every year. You can actually do it twice a year. You can buy fresh fruit from South America. A number of companies out there will bring in fruit, and you can buy that. But and then I know Great Fermentations, and I'm sure other stores will bring in wine juice or grape juice from wine grapes from California and some even South America, and you can ferment those. But geez, they have wine kits now that actually produce just, I've seen just some amazing gold medal winners at wine competitions.
Oh yeah, I've personally done a number of them. Now I personally recommend buying the higher end kits, even though they're a little more, they probably run $100 to $130 maybe for a kit. But if you think about, what 20 bottles of wine cost, good quality wine, it's not an outrageous fee at all. But if you start with some of those higher end kits, you can make really great wine, and it doesn't take that many years. It doesn't take that much time. In a lot of cases, the wine's very drinkable within just a couple of months.
Yeah, yeah. Most of those kits are set up for, I think, right at about 2 months where you're drinking them, and that's not only whites; that's the red wine kits too. I've got some oak barrels, and I usually make between 60 and 90 gallons at a time. So, but that's, they sit in the barrels for 9 months. So you've got to tend them and be patient, but to me, that's the fun in it. But geez, these kits are quite amazing. So,
yeah.
And even recipe kits for beer, that's another simple way is, just order the recipe kit from your homebrew store, and, you don't have to mess around with a lot of that, or worry if your recipe is going to turn out, because most of those the store, they confirm that, yep, those are good recipes. So that's another simplification too.
Another interesting trend I'm seeing is I'm getting people writing me now and going, I brewed 6 years ago or 8 years ago or 10 years ago, and now I'm getting back in the hobby. How do I get my software going again, and so on. Do you think the big bubble, the big boost that we saw, the bubble, I want to say, 10 years ago, do you think some of those people might come back into the hobby as they age? Because, like you said, your kids move on, your things change, and now all of a sudden you're revisiting hobbies that you may not have enjoyed for many years.
I sure hope so. It's a little different for me because I was always in the business.
Yeah.
But I really kind of considered the home brewing as my hobby, the equipment manufacturing as my job. Obviously interrelated, but I find myself going, I'd really kind of like to, brew once a month, twice a month, and just for the pure enjoyment of it. Well, and of course having some great beer on hand. But I noticed with me, I'm having more time on my hands now, and I really hope that we do see a resurgence there of people coming back into that hobby.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the other things
Go
on
ahead.
equipment that we never really talked about
Yeah.
is on the fermentation side, it was really trending towards very high end uh, uh, fermenting devices, where, no oxygen, pressure capable, all that. And that's fun if you like that, all those features. Um, it does come with a price tag. Uh, but some of it for me is that's a lot of stuff to clean.
Yeah.
And, I've, especially with the 5 gallon batch size, I tend to use my stainless steel anvil bucket fermenter uh, more and more for those. And, especially with ales where you're not necessarily going to have to crash cool, where you're worried about, air infiltration. But, for so many years, people were using carboys and plastic buckets, and I tasted some fantastic beers.
I still ferment a lot of stuff in plastic buckets. Not necessarily my beers. I do more meads and stuff like that.
Right.
But they come out just fine,
Yeah.
And like you said, you put it in a glass carboy, that thing's basically inert. It's not going to do anything to the beer.
Right. And it's pretty much an oxygen vault. Just stainless steel is too. But most of that stuff with the oxidation, just don't do dumb stuff. Don't purposely splash or gee, I think I'll open every time I see these. Does this look infected? Things on Facebook. It's like, well, probably because you keep opening the damn bucket.
Yeah.
So, yeah. So, I mean, I tend towards that.
I think there's a case to be made that, the fermentation and the bottling and so on can be simplified quite a bit as well,
Oh yeah. Yeah.
I
I've
mean,
got my
certainly
original-
kegging superior to bottling. So if you can afford even, and people are buying small kegs now too, which are kind of nice.
Oh yeah. Yeah. I've got 2.5 gallon kegs that, one, it's great. It's super easy to bring to, a party, or bring on a fishing trip or that kind of thing. But, bottling can be kind of and, a little bit of a chore, but you can also have that as a fun thing, get some friends over, get some family over and that kind of thing. And then, like I say, with, the more simple you go with your equipment, it's just going to be a little bit faster brew day because there's less equipment to clean and get ready and clean up afterwards. And, I can get, that stainless bucket fermenter ready to go in, geez, probably 5 minutes.
Yeah.
To spray, surface spray Star San on all the surfaces and pretty well ready to go.
So, John, I think we're seeing a period of time where homebrewing starts to move away from, emulating these giant professional systems in our garage and maybe towards meeting a person's busy lifestyle. Is that such a bad thing, John?
I don't think it's necessarily a bad thing at all. I mean, again, I got into the hobby originally because I thought the process was cool and I thought the equipment side was fun. And I ended up making a career out of it. But, so it's more what you want out of the hobby. And if it's just the joy of home brewing, wait, that's Patient's book, isn't it? The
Yeah.
Joy of Home Brewing. If it's just that, that pure enjoyment you get out of it, there's no real driving force to complicate that. The more simple you can make it, the more consistent your beers will be. And, it's, you really don't have to overcomplicate things to make really good beer. The only reason to complicate things is if that's part of your joy in doing things is just, and I get that. That's, I've definitely like that, but I've also changed with all the other hobbies that I'm doing again that, I'd like to spend, 3-4 hours brewing and you can easily do that these days.
Yeah.
Even with all grain systems.
Well, another thing I like to remind folks, we are in the golden age of homebrewing, really. We have more options for equipment, better knowledge, better ingredients than we ever had before by far. You can certainly emulate everything the professionals do at home if you want to. But we also have options. We can buy very simple things. We can go back to simple things. And now with all the knowledge we have, we can even make better beer with very simpler equipment.
Yeah. It used to be, somebody's made, you want to try my homebrew? And people would kind of be a little scared to try it. And, now it's not uncommon that the homebrews that you're trying are better than the beers you can buy on the shelf. And that's all the knowledge that's been out there. Some of it's equipment. There's a lot of it that's ingredient based. I mean, you can get so many ingredients now that are absolutely fresh.
I mean, the quality of the yeast and the hops we can get now is it's light years beyond where it was when we started.
Right. Yeah, dry yeast used to be kind of poo-pooed at because they weren't particularly pure and there weren't very many varieties that you could get. Now you can get just about any of the yeast varieties in dry format. And now they're even suggesting just sprinkle it on top. It used to be they would want you to make to rehydrate, and that's not that big of a deal. It's another, 10 or 15 minutes, of prep, and then you can wait a little bit.
Yeah, I still push people. I think it's worth rehydrating if you're making a very high gravity beer. There's actually some good reasons behind that. But if you're not, it's probably not necessary.
Yeah. And, you can, with you can also pitch multiple packs, but it's something that if you don't want to do it, it's not going to ruin your beer. I think your beer will turn out just fine. Just sprinkling them on top. And a lot of the manufacturers now that's the instructions on it is, sprinkle it on top.
Yeah.
So, so I mean, just look at those, those different simplifications, and you can store that yeast for, a much longer period than a liquid yeast. And liquid yeasts are great. I still use them very frequently. But if I'm in a pinch or, I'm brewing something like a porter that's gonna, the yeast character is not going to be as prominent as, some of the chocolate malts, et cetera, that are in there. And, where the yeast takes a little bit more of a back seat. Those are great yeast choices.
Well, John, I'm probably in the minority here, but for some reason, I just believe we are going to see a resurgence in homebrewing in the next couple of years. And so it'll be interesting to see what happens there. I wanted to get your closing thoughts, though, John.
Yeah, I think, getting back to some of the basics like we were talking here and just, just sharing with, all the friends and family, how fun this hobby can be and how enjoyable it can be to do, together. Getting back with some of the basics of the homebrew clubs and supporting your local stores. I think we can see a nice growth trend and, and teaching those, new entrants how to brew and make this a great hobby for them. So that's kind of where I see things going.
Well, thanks, John. I appreciate you coming on the show. Thanks for agreeing to do this. I know you are retired now, so.
I know. I'm busier than I've ever been.
It's a pleasure having my guest, John Blichmann, the founder and retired president of Blichmann Engineering. Thanks again, John.
Nice to see you again, Brad. Thanks for the invite.
A big thank you to John Blichmann for joining me this week. Thanks also to this week's sponsors, Craft Beer and Brewing Magazine. They recently added a new collection of more than 500 beer recipes from pro brewers to their site, and most of them let you download the BeerSmith recipe file. The new Craft Beer and Brewing recipe site is at beerandbrewing.com/beer-recipes. Again, that site is beerandbrewing.com/beer-recipes. And BeerSmith Web, the online version of BeerSmith brewing software. BeerSmith for the web lets you design great beer recipes from any browser, including your tablet or phone. Edit recipes on the go with access to the same full suite of recipe building tools as our desktop version. Try BeerSmith Web today by creating a free account at beersmithrecipes.com. And finally, a reminder to click that like and subscribe button on YouTube, iTunes, Spotify, or whatever platform you're on. Clicking those buttons is a great way to support the show. I'd like to thank you for listening, and I hope you have a great brewing week.